I'm an imposter. I shouldn't be here. I'm going to be found out either by a colleague, a boss, a leader, an audience member, maybe a friend at time.
Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Sound Leadership, the podcast designed for L&D, HR professionals and leaders. Today we're unpacking the topic of imposter syndrome, and the more I research this and the more people I speak to, the more I recognise that everyone at some point in their life has suffered with it or is suffering from it. And today we want to debunk the syndrome aspect of that. I'm Dan Boniface and I'm joined today by a learning and development expert, Darren Draper. Darren, welcome along to the show.
Thank you very much.
Let's dive straight in. What is imposter syndrome?
Let's separate the words to start with. Let's start with imposter. And that means that someone's trying to be someone that they're not. And to put that into a work context, it's actually, I've got a job that I don't have the skills for, I don't have the behaviours for, or don't have the knowledge for. And I guess the syndrome part, and I read something the other day on LinkedIn by Jake Humphreys, who presents the High Performance podcast, where he was talking about moving away from that word syndrome because it's not a medically diagnosed condition, and actually move more towards a feeling, because actually the syndrome part is actually the thought process. So actually, I'm an imposter. I'm trying to be someone I'm not, but I'm thinking that isn't actually my reality.
Feels like a crazy thing to say, doesn't it? Why are we thinking that I don't deserve to be here? But this is a very real problem. And like I say, the more people I've spoken to, particularly, throughout my sort of coaching and training career, where I'm very privileged to get to speak to a lot of people, and this comes up all the time. Every single course we deliver, someone in the room is talking about imposter syndrome. And actually, if they're not, they're probably not being truthful around it, because I think they have experienced it. So look, it can be quite crippling as well. Just give us a bit more insight into how this kind of plays out and how you would see this.
You mentioned at the start that, it happens to lots of people. And more importantly, it can happen to anyone. There's a famous video with Michelle Obama talking about imposter syndrome. And you're like, well, if it can happen to her, it can happen to anyone. And it can happen to anyone in any situation. So we commonly talk about it or feel it at work. I've got a new job and suddenly I'm seeing everyone around me and I'm seeing their skills and I'm going, I don't have those skills. You see someone else's knowledge, you go, I don't have that knowledge. You get put into a meeting, you see someone's badge and their job title and you go, I haven't got that, what can I add? So it's quite common in the workplace, especially in new roles or new situations, but it can also be found outside the workplace, around social settings. Where do I feel comfortable? Or if I'm going to make a speech to people, all around that, I'm an imposter. I shouldn't be here. I'm going to be found out either by a colleague, a boss, a leader, an audience member, maybe a friend at time.
Yeah, and again, I agree with you. We see this against or within all levels of an organisation. And I think sometimes we look in business and we look at someone that is a CEO, an MD, something like that, and they almost look untouchable, that nothing can affect them at all. But again, the more people I speak to of that level and down to, kind of first line managers, team leaders, they all get it, because ultimately we're all just human beings and we all have similar thought processes. And I think that helps us in understanding that, like you say about Michelle Obama, look, hey, if someone like that can get it, it's okay for me to get it. And if the CEO of this huge organization can get it, it's okay for me to get it as well. So we're experiencing this across all levels of the business, right?
Definitely. And there is a big difference between what we would class as imposter syndrome, so the thought that I shouldn't be there, and those nerves or butterflies that we feel before a big occasion. I've read many articles with musicians talking about nerves, And these are experienced musicians that have been touring for years upon years upon years, and they still get those nerves. And they talk about how important those nerves are to perform at their best. And what's really important in that is that their nerves is because they want to give the best possible show possible. It's not focused on what they're getting from the audience. It's not focused on will they enjoy it? Will it be the best concert they've ever been to? And I think that's really important when we start talking about imposter syndrome, because those nerves are about me performing at my best. Where imposter syndrome, a lot of the time, is about that external validation and actually what will other people think of me? Someone's going to find me out. And that's where that imposter side comes out.
Yeah, agreed. Just when you're talking about those nerves there, so actually I tend to flip this around and look at it from a positive point of view, which I think is hard to do initially, but over time you can get to that space where this hijacking of our thoughts is good, because when we look at cortisol, which is stress hormone, so it's released into the body. So when we're put under stress, we're doing something, like going to present in front of 200 people, we've got a boardroom meeting, or we're in the senior leadership team and we're having to go and present to the board, something along those lines. Actually, this release of cortisol is a good thing, because it's our body's response of saying, hey, look, something's coming up that you need to be prepared for. And it's not a runaway situation, but it's a let's get ready for this. It's heightened emotions, getting ready for it. So we do see this play out in different ways, but when we can flip that around and make that a positive, then that's got to be a good thing, hasn't it?
Definitely. If we can reframe a mind into a positive situation, we start seeing positives. But when our mind's in a negative situation, we only see negatives. So, I always think of it as like building blocks. So, let's say I'm in a meeting and we're talking about a subject where I don't feel like I'm an expert. Suddenly a building block goes up. You go, well, I'm not an expert. I don't really know much. And everyone else in the room seems to know a lot more. And then you go, well, maybe I should ask a question. But then what will everyone else think of me when I've asked that question? So I'm not going to. Building block. And then we go, oh, we're silent in the meeting. What will people think of us because we're not saying anything? Another building block. And suddenly we've got a wall. But let's reframe all that into a positive, that you go into that meeting and go, actually, I know a little bit about this subject. And what people are saying relates to me. And I reckon I can bring it to life in a certain way. So I'm going to add value. I've got a question. Now, the chances are if I've got a question, someone else has got a question. So I'm going to ask it, because I may inform at least me, but I may inform someone else. And actually, if I'm staying silent because the conversation's going well in the room, I'm learning stuff, and actually I haven't got anything to add, that's good leadership, because you're creating the space for others to express their opinion.
Yeah, there's often in coaching, or number one rule of coaching is to be curious. So it's good if you're sat there and you don't know something, ask a question, find out, because that will do several things. It will give you insight for starters, but if you phrase the question in the right way, nobody knows that you don't know it. All you're doing is creating a bit of a spark in the room, a bit of creativity as well. So it's really important that we view ourselves, that we are supposed to be there, that we are in the right place at the right time as well. As you're talking about that brick wall and building that up, my thought process goes to, well, when we get that first brick in place, don't go any further. Let's break that in that moment. Or if we've gone a little bit further and we have built a bit of a wall up, let's just smash that down. And there's ways that we can do that, which we'll explore shortly. But it's about that control in our own mind, because you alluded to it there. It's actually the bit we do have control over is our own thought process and the things that we can do. And that's where I'll come back to that hijacking of thoughts. If we understand that this is a hijacking and it's a preparation piece for what's about to come, that's great. And then we can break that barrier down. Give and get is something you mention a lot of the time. So just give us a bit of insight into what we mean by give and get.
We can focus in two different areas. We can focus on what we give, or we can focus on what we get. Now, I believe with the give side, we have 100% control over what we can give. So that includes our attitudes, our commitment, our skills, knowledge, behaviours, all of that. We're actually getting, we have very little control over, if any. And so if you start off in a position where you're going to go into a meeting and go, well, I'm going to give to this meeting. I'm going to focus on what I can add to conversation, how I can share my knowledge, how I can make best use of my skills, instead of I want people to think that I'm great at my job and walk out with everyone singing praises of me. Our behaviours will be very different. Because actually, if we focus on that we could go into that meeting and go, right, I'm going to take over it. And that's fantastic that you've shared all that stuff. But have you got to the best possible solution? Actually, by you taking over a meeting, we haven't created that diversity and that inclusion of thought to get to those best possible solutions. So I would always challenge people to move towards that give. What am I going to give to a day? And I think a training course is a fantastic example, because I think we all go into that going, well, I'm going to get more knowledge from it. But the best training courses that I've been on is when people give. People give their own stories, bring it to life, and develop other people's thought process. And because of that, they've got a better learning experience. So by focusing on give doesn't mean you don't get anything. It just shows where your focus is.
Yeah, really vital that we go into it. And if we look at that from an imposter point of view, we're going into, say, a boardroom meeting or that senior leadership team meeting, and if we can give something, and sometimes that's just about quiet leadership. Sometimes it is about sit back, observe what's going on, take in the information, watch people's body language, facial expressions, eye contact, observe the room, and then we can give and we can add value to the conversations. The other thing we do is, if we can give to the group, I think about it as, lighting a fire. So there might be a small spark, but we've got to ignite it. We've got to get that going. So if we're building a little fire, we've got to ignite that kindling, and then it goes. And sometimes we hold back. And actually, by just igniting that kindling, then the rest of the room will come on board with it. And then we work some stuff out. Then we find some ways to move forwards as a group. So look, we got some pretty funky names for imposter syndrome, and in terms of this is how it shows up in everyday life or within our work environment. So look, tell me about being the perfectionist as an imposter.
We can look at this in two different ways. So firstly, we see others as the perfectionist. So the work that they deliver to a really perfect standard, in our opinion, and we've always got to go back to that, our opinion, and we go, we cannot live up to that. So that puts that brick wall up straight away. Well, I can't deliver that standard. Why would anyone accept anything less? Switch that round, and we would get imposter syndrome because we cannot deliver something to a perfect standard. Now, someone once said to me, don't let great get in the way of good. And I think that's really important, is actually, if you deliver some work, and it may not be perfect, but actually it's 80-90% of the way there, that you can get some support on, or actually that's good enough for the moment, you've moved forward as both an employee, the value that you're adding to the business, and the value that you've added to others.
It's called maladaptive perfectionism, when we're aiming for 100%. And it doesn't need to be that far. It doesn't mean we lower our standards. It means that actually 90% might be a job well done, and therefore we can move forwards. Look, one of our favourites, I think we agreed on this one, is the Superwoman, Superman aspect. What on earth does that mean?
So that is someone that that has, always talks about their family life and doing bits and bobs with their children, other halves, other family members. They hold down a job. They go and do charity work. They're always planning to run a marathon. And you're looking at them and going, wow, how do they fit all of this into their day? And firstly, I would challenge anyone to give feedback to these people about how inspiring they are. But also, you just get to know them, because actually you'll find out that they don't see themselves as superhuman. What they see themselves is just trying to get by. They might be running a marathon for a good cause. They could be doing it for a bit of fitness. They're always taxiing their family members about, but that's them trying to be a good parent or a good brother, sister, daughter, son. All of those things, and we make assumptions based on just what we see.
We can use this in one of two ways, that we model and we look at them and go, wow, how do they do that? Best way to find out, ask them. Let's go and talk to them. Hey, look, you look like you've got everything under control. How do you do that? How do you manage your life and this job? How are you a high flyer? How are you keeping your family in check? How are you doing all your personal admin, all of this kind of stuff? How do you do that so well? So let's ask them. So we can use it as an inspiration. What tends to show up is in this imposter syndrome, this hijacking of our thoughts is, I'm never going to be able to do that. I just can't control that. I can barely look after myself. I'm struggling to get going in the morning, just about getting the kids out the door to get off to school. And we all know what that's like. But actually, when we speak to these people, look like they've got it all under control. There are the elements in there where they have the same challenges as everyone else. Being a natural genius?
Well, you could say that that's been created by society a little bit much on what a genius is. And again, it's about looking at that someone that has that IQ knowledge that maybe you don't have, that I've certainly experienced in the past, and go, well, I don't have that knowledge and I can't live up to that.
Yeah, I remember doing that as well at times, both personally and professionally, and looking around the room and going, geez, these guys are really, really intelligent. I've just got nothing to offer here. But then we look at the different types of clever. It's that bringing it back to what can we give? And actually, I can give a different perspective. I can give different viewpoints. I can look at things from a different angle. I can give a different experience. And this cognitive diversity, all these different thoughts in the room is a real positive. We don't want everyone thinking in exactly the same way, because that's not beneficial, because we're only going down one pathway then. And there's many different ways to get to where we're heading.
And suddenly, when we're in a room that we start putting IQ, we start attaching that to higher level jobs as well. So we sort of say, well, because someone is a managing director, their IQ must be greater than mine. In subjects, they might be. In other subjects, they're not. And actually what you've got to realise, you're the expert at something in the room. You've just got to sometimes find out what you're expert of in the room.
Yeah, I totally agree. Lots of different industries and sectors require different things, different components. I've got a friend who is literally a rocket scientist. Yeah. He's very clever and has to be in terms of intellect. But then we look at other industries, and you don't need that intelligence around being a scientist. You need other aspects. And there's lots of research out there now that suggests that emotional intelligence is on par with intellect in terms of being successful in your career. Now, we can have a different conversation another day about what successful in your career means, but emotional intelligence is right up there, and empathy and understanding different people. Final one, talk to me about being an expert.
Again, this is about viewing someone as the expert in their field. And we all look at a job description and see what we think the perfect employee is in this. And that puts an imposter syndrome straight in there, because you're like, well, I'm not this perfect employee. Well, of course you're not, because probably no one is. Because good in that role is many different things. And we've got to focus on what we bring to that role on top of the job description that then creates you good in that role. Because if we all strive to be the same, especially when there's us and many others that are doing very similar jobs, going back to that diversity in thought, that doesn't get created. So moving away from that imposter syndrome of this is what perfect in the role looks like to how can I be perfect in the role? Because that's what was employed. You weren't employed because of a job description. You were employed because of you.
Totally agree with that. Yep, all about the people. In addition then, let's add one more into the mix. The soloist, which sounds like something to do with musicians to me, but what's this?
So this is about someone that looks to do everything themselves. So actually I need to, and you can start linking a few of these, the perfectionist and the soloist together by going, well, I need to be all of this and I need to do it all. Where actually it's about bringing that, if you don't have the knowledge, get someone to help you. You know, that's why you have different expertise in a business. And we need to start bringing them together. Going back again to inclusivity and diversity of thought, actually, it stops us moving forward if we do it all on our own. And, you know, I remember a story that was about a marketing person who was trying to create a marketing campaign, surrounding themselves with their team that were all marketing experts. And just something wasn't clicking. And the cleaner came into the room, and the cleaner's son was a graffiti artist. And they saw all this on the wall and went, oh, have you ever thought about graffiti art? And they were like, no. And they spoke to them about graffiti art. And that was the magic that created a different thought process and just a different avenue that made this marketing campaign come together. And so sometimes it isn't even an expert or what you perceive as an expert that can bring those good ideas.
Love that. Totally love that. Because we get so blinkered on our route forwards through unconscious bias or our previous experiences informing the way forwards. And it might be a company culture of, we've always done it this way, so we're going to carry on doing it this way. And again, when we can bring other people into the room, that allows them to then feel a part of it, whoever they are, because they've all got something to offer. And this is the point around imposter syndrome. Everyone's got something to bring to the table. And when we go outside of what we just see in front of us, all of a sudden we get these crazy ideas about, you know, turning the office around with a load of graffiti, which just feels mad. But hang on a second, that might just work. So it's about bringing people on that journey as well. So out of those different aspects, those different characters within imposter syndrome, are there any in particular that resonate the most with you that you've experienced?
I think for me, it's a lot of it was around the perfectionist side and around the soloist side. That when I started my roles in continuous improvement, looking at process change, there is some naturally really gifted process leads that had years of experience, years of knowledge. And I looked at them and went, I don't have that. How am I ever going to live up to these standards? And actually, it took a few months to realise what sort of process manager I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to do was deliver change through the teams that are working on these processes. Is because listening to their ideas, their knowledge, their, you know, change of process that's all been done unofficially, that's when true magic happens in change. Because you're not thinking, as a process manager, I have all the information. You're thinking, I can add a bit of structure. But actually, the ideas are already happening. The knowledge is already there. And what you move into in that position is you bring people along on that change. So I was able to move my imposter syndrome away from, I don't think I'm good enough, to actually, I can deliver some of the best change. And even better than that, I can bring the people along with me so that they're not feeling like change is being done on the outside, but actually I'm part of it and I'm making a difference to not only my working life, but the working lives of others as well.
What I'm hearing there is that we need to surround ourselves with experts. And one of the key things with leadership is being comfortable in that, because we get worried that, you know, if we bring experts in around us, that makes us look poor or weak in our job. So we get insecure around it. And actually, I think if we can move this hijacking of thoughts to one side and look at it for what's best for the business, the team, the individuals within the team, bring the experts in. And a great leader is the one that can bring those people together and allow them to thrive. It's that quiet leadership, that conscious leadership piece again.
And I think it goes back to, you know, Michelle Obama talking about imposter syndrome. I became more inspired by her through listening to that speech. So let's put that as a leader. If I was working for someone who went, yeah, I still get imposter syndrome, when I've got a big speech or got to present to the board, yeah, I still feel like I shouldn't be in the room. And actually, sometimes when I speak to you about your knowledge on things, I don't feel like I'm up to that standard. You're like, I want to work for this person. I want to achieve. I will go through a brick wall for this person because they're a person. Suddenly that title's gone and they've gone, this is me. And so as leaders, sometimes it's about showing that vulnerability, because if we want people to talk about imposter syndrome in the workplace, to be happier, more comfortable in the workplace and probably become more vulnerable themselves, we need to role model those behaviours. Because again, we can only focus on give. So if I want to be more vulnerable, I create that space for others to be the same.
Without a doubt. And Brené Brown does a great piece. She's got a fantastic TED talk on vulnerability, and I'd recommend anyone to go and watch that, because as leaders, it's good to show a bit of vulnerability. And actually, let's talk about imposter syndrome. Let's not hide it back, because the more we talk about it, the more we recognise people as suffering from it or have it, and therefore the more we can support others as well. Just in terms of those different types as well, the soloist just really sticks out for me, just for my early management career, and did the whole accidental manager thing of, getting promoted really quickly and then going, oh, now I've got to manage some people, not just myself or the process. I've got to manage people alongside it. And I got myself in a state of mind where I felt like I couldn't go and speak up. I couldn't go and ask for help, because I was put in that position as an expert, and I'd be seen as weak, or I'd be judged as being poor at my job. Well, I mean, looking back now, it just feels like a crazy thing to do, because I'm quite happy to speak up and talk about things I don't know about, or be curious and extract the information from others. But back then, I was really nervous about that, and that's where that soloist piece is can be quite damaging. So we've got to move ourselves away from that as soon as we can. And that's where our strategies and our methodology should hopefully help us. So talk me through some of the things that we can do, some of the practical things that we can put into place that will help us move away from this hijacking of our thoughts.
Okay, well, let's start as sort of us with the imposter syndrome. And I think, we talk about acknowledge, accept, and then arrive. So acknowledging is all around, I've got the imposter syndrome. And maybe identifying what type I've got as well, just moves us into that next level of knowledge, that we move into that choice space. The next thing is accepting it. Now, we know it happens to lots of people, if not everyone, in certain situations. So actually, it's about going, it's fine that I'm feeling this way. But actually, how can I start arriving in this situation with a different mindset? So what is going to be my first next step? And actually linking to the next bit of advice, it's going to be, what's my first positive next step? Because the next technique we've got to use is reframing. We've got to move away from what skills don't I have to what skills do I have. You were employed in a business for a reason. Bring those reasons to life. Because the only way you're probably not going to succeed in your job is not doing anything because you're too scared to start. And actually, it's about bringing you into work. Businesses spend millions of pounds recruiting, and they recruited you. You're special. So bring those special skills every single day. And as leaders, we need to create that space. And then there's little things that we can do. So actually, if we're starting to feel maybe in a social aspect or a training course, actually, what physical things can I do to start reframing the mind? And one is about a finger and a thumb, just lightly touching. So you can just feel your fingerprint. And then just for a second, your mind will go off and just feel that. And it's much easier to change what your thought process will be than trying to change what your thought process is. So actually, how can I just switch that mind to something else for a split second, so then my mind can move to that positive place?
It's amazing how well that little tip works. And because we're just taking, as you say, we're taking our mind from the psychological aspect to the physical. And it's a distraction technique. And it's exactly what we do for anyone that's a parent. When our kids hurt themselves, they're getting upset, we try and distract them with a positive thought, a positive thing that's coming up. And do you know what? adults are not that different. We can use the same techniques just to move people forwards. Some of the other stuff you mentioned there around those AAAs, so acknowledge, accept, and arrive at the next positive thought. So in coaching terms, we talk about this a lot. What's the first next step? What is the next small thing that we've got to do? Because often we focus on this big, overwhelming problem. So we might be having to go and present at a company conference in front of 200 people. We might have to go and present to the board, and we might not be a board member. That feels really daunting. But arriving at the next positive thought, and something I often talk about is if we can make 1% difference to one person, we're winning. So if we go and present to lots of people and there's 200 people in the audience and we feel really nervous about it, then actually if I make 1% difference to one person, I've done a good job. And trust me, you'll always make more than that anyway. But if we go in with that mindset of the first next step, the next small thing that we can do, we'll move forwards in a positive frame of mind. And again, that reframing piece, we get so caught up on the business aspect of things. And I know I've heard you talk about this about, I believe your belief is that life and work are one. Yeah, they're not two separate things. And the reframing piece, we're in a work situation, right? I've got to go and have this difficult conversation with my manager. I want a salary increase, or, you know, we're an L&D professional or HR, and we've got to go and have a difficult conversation. We've got to go and make someone redundant, for example. These really nasty things that we've got to do. Well, let's reframe that. So can I go and have a brave conversation or courageous conversation? And if our employee feels like they can't, or again, inside out, if from our own perspective, if we feel like we can't in that moment, let's think about other times where we've been brave or courageous. And there might have been a time, and I'll speak personally, you know, I was 15 years old, playing rugby, broke my arm, about the only match where my parents weren't around, had to go to hospital with some other parent. It was all very scary. But I look back now, and I go, I was brave, I was courageous. And I get myself into situations where I have to go and have a conversation with someone now. You're like, can I be brave? Yeah, I can, because I've done it before, because I know what that feels like. So we've got to look at the positives, and we've got to reframe into, can I do that? Yeah, absolutely. I can do that, and I can move things forwards.
Yeah, and sometimes, just like James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits, it's about breaking things down to its smallest denominator. So when you're presenting to 100, 200 people in a room, you go, have you spoken to someone before? You're like, yeah, okay. Well, that's all you're doing. You're speaking to a person again. So yeah, just breaking that down.
So let's talk about the top 3 takeaways from today. What do we got?
So for me, it's about that reframing of your mind. So do I deserve to be here? Am I the best person to do the job? And, you know, and I think that links into that acknowledge, accept, and arrive and or move on, is actually if I can acknowledge that I've got it. So again, positive. I'm acknowledging that I own my own thoughts and feelings, and I accept that other people get it and I've got it at the moment. Then I've got to fully accept that I've got to make a choice now. I'm either going to let that thought process take over, put a block on me as both an employee or a person, could create behavioural confrontations as well at times, to then go, I'm going to arrive, I'm going to move on. What's my first positive next step? And, you know, that brings those two together. If you can put the acknowledge, the accept, and the arrive all in the positives, then you're starting to really push that mind, and that mind will then start to see the positives. But then take confidence from your wins. From that first next step, what difference has that made? Because when you start seeing the positives, you'll start to see more positives. You know, if you get up in the morning and go, today's going to be a good day, suddenly you don't see the rain out the window. What you see is, I've enjoyed my coffee this morning, or my car's started, and all of that. So by just focusing on those quick wins, then it can really build. And then I think the last one for me is about that vulnerability from leadership. You need to be the role model if you want people to start opening up on things such as imposter syndrome. If you want feedback of how people feel when they start in their role, people aren't just going to come to you and go, here's my feedback, I feel like an imposter. Actually, you've got to start those conversations, role model those behaviours, ask for any feedback on how they can improve the situation to stop people getting it in the future. And when you start role modelling those behaviours, you'll start seeing it from others, because it's up to us as leaders to create that culture that we want to see.
I had a couple of guys that I was coaching that were in the military, and they worked on the principle that the first thing they did when they got out of bed was made their bed, because whatever else happens in the day, they've done something really well first up. And I think it's a really good mindset to get into. And I think those small wins, those quick wins really help us from that imposter syndrome perspective, because then we're looking back throughout the day going, no, I've had all these wins today. I'm moving forwards. I'm doing the right thing. Fantastic. Thank you, Darren. Thanks for your insight. And that's all for today, guys, on the sound leadership. So we hope you found that valuable, and there's lots of insights and things to take away that you can go and put into practice. Make sure you subscribe, and for more information on how the BCF Group can help you, please go to our website, www.thebcfgroup.co.uk. And lastly, thanks to you for tuning in today. The Sound Leadership is produced and edited by the BCF Group in partnership with Media First, and we'll see you on the next episode. The Sound Leadership podcast was produced by Media First. To learn more about the media crisis and communications training, visit mediafirst.co.uk. The editor and producer was Darren Wingham. The show was hosted, written and researched by me, Dan Boniface. A special thanks to all the team at Media First and the BCF Group for supporting the development of this podcast. To learn more about the management, leadership, training and coaching that the BCF Group offer, visit thebcfgroup.co.uk or get in touch by emailing hello@thebcfgroup.co.uk. Finally, a special thanks to our exceptional guest today, who you can contact via the BCF Group.